This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Shaun Cole, and today we're here to check out the Thrustmaster 488 GT3 add-on wheel. And this is the first wheel from Thrustmaster that is built specifically to go on the T818 base. So ever since we did our first reviews of the T818, I loved the wheelbase, but I hated the adapter. Let's face it, I did not like the adapter that you had to put on the wheel to use the base. That is now gone, and you have the option, we're going to get to that, of using the ready-to-go T818 adapter. So that's what we're going to focus a lot of our review on. So this wheel rim goes for $249, which in today's day and age is quite reasonable, especially when you consider it's a real carbon fiber faceplate. So what do you get for your money? Well, you get a 1-to-1 scale replica of the real-life 488 GT3 car, which means if you're driving the car in game, you should see the exact wheel on your screen as you're holding in your hands. You get adjustable magnetic paddle shifters. You got dual magnets. You can move these shifters outward or closer to the grips, however you like it. You get a 310 millimeter 12.2 inch wide wheel rim for plenty of leverage. You get 2-piece rubber grips out on the ends. You get 11 action buttons, 5 down this side, 6 over on this side. You got 2 thumb switches at the top, left and right. And then you got 2 rotary encoders down on the bottom with the press-in function. On top of that, you have 4 LEDs at the top. The 2 inner ones are shift flash, and then you've got pit indicator, and I saw like a blue light for when I was being passed by a lapping car. Those are adjustable in brightness and come in 2 settings, GT or open wheeler. So that's what makes up the 488 GT3 wheel rim. Now, I would say out of the box it works on the T818, but in fact you do have to choose between 2 adapters that can be installed onto the back of the wheel rim. One being the threaded adapter that works with all previous Thrustmaster bases, and then the other being the new adapter which works directly onto the T818. In either scenario, the installation is pretty straightforward. You're going to plug in the wire. You're going to align the adapter properly, make sure you're not pinching the wire, and then use the 4 supplied bolts and tool to lock it down. Pretty basic, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. And with that, that takes me to one of my favorite things about the Thrustmaster new quick release wheel system is that it's so easy. I mean, I don't even have this base mounted to anything. It's just sitting here on the desk, and you basically just slide the wheel in and clamp it down. Now, sure, it's all made of plastic, both on the wheel and the wheelbase side, but it is just so easy to use. So the faceplate is real carbon fiber, but if you look at the very edge here, it is only about 2.5 millimeters thick. So it's not a very thick carbon fiber piece, but it is real carbon fiber. On the back, it is all hard plastic, and it does cover up almost all of the faceplate, except for just towards the grips. You'll see the carbon fiber is slightly exposed. Those magnetic paddle shifters are made of metal. Now you will notice it is already pre-marked for the actual functions of the 488 race car, and their exact 1-to-1 replica means you get the exact, including the one marked for drink. So like for me, I don't have a drink system in my sim. I'm going to map that to something else, and I'm going to have to remember. Do I remember it by the button or by the drink label, or do I cover it up with something else? And funny enough, in real life photos of 488 GT3 race cars, I actually saw steering wheels with some of the labels actually covered up like I'll end up doing. And with that, I think it's time to get this all on my rig and get down to testing. We're going to focus more on the wheel and not so much on the base. We've done previous reviews of the base. I'll put the links of those in the description. So if you want to know more on the T818 base specifically, you can watch those reviews. We're going to really focus our energy on that new quick release system and the function of the 488 GT3 add-on wheel. When judging a steering wheel for sim racing on its own merits, we can break it down to a few really important categories. Number 1, ecosystem. Is it an ecosystem-driven wheel? In the case of the 488 GT3 wheel, this is only going to work on Thrustmaster bases, so there is no working it on any other type of base. So it is in their ecosystem. And then the next 2 things would be, is it aesthetically, visually, is it the wheel that you are looking for? Some people want a butterfly or formula style. Some people are looking for a round. So does it fit your style? And then lastly, its function, and that would come down to paddle shifters, its grip, its comfort, its overall strength, and maybe even the button layout or displays and other factors. So when we're looking at the 488 GT3 rim by Thrustmaster, Let's first start with the quick release itself. So this is the first wheel using that new quick release system by Thrustmaster. No adapter, which means everything's a lot more compact. The wheel's going to be a lot closer to the base instead of having an extension. And that makes it quite a bit stronger, even though it's still a plastic quick release mechanism. Now, on and off of the base is super easy. It is a really cool quick release as far as design goes. It's that easy to get it on and off, so that's real nice. Now, when it comes down to the strength, which would be the next factor, and really I focus my attention on that quick release. You know, nowadays you're looking at NRG style or the QR1R type quick releases. So many metal on metal options that are being utilized in sim racing. Thrustmaster with their new system, it is that super strong, super hard plastic, but it is plastic. Now on it, if I go up and down, you'll see that the entire base, the entire rig, the entire wheel all move in unison. So while we can measure some distance of movement, it's not happening at that quick release. It's not happening in the wheel. When we use the TGT2 with the adapter on the T818 base, we had a bit of flex there, so that wasn't very cool. Now when I go left to right, you will see a hint more flex than we did in the other direction. And the main reason for that is the distance, so we have a little more leverage. And then the other is, you'll notice that the flex is actually happening a lot at the wheel instead of even at the quick release or the base so much. And that is this 2.5mm carbon fiber plate. So while the skeleton, the backbone of the 488 GT3 is this real carbon fiber plate, at 2.5mm, it's not very thick. So where we have this plastic back that protects it, it is very stiff, but out on the ends, you will notice you get just a hint of flex or twist at these three spots, top, middle, and bottom, where it's unreinforced and it's all dependent on that carbon fiber plate. But overall, while driving, it's a super stiff, super strong wheel. That flex that I'm feeling is only happening during a grip torture test. Now, one of the other cool features of this rim is that it is only $249. And how do you do $249 with real carbon fiber? Well, you don't put a fancy display in it. You know, when I talk about displays in a steering wheel, displays are great for those who use them and want them. For others, it's just really bright, it's in the way, and they might not even see or use the display. So why pay for it? Why have it obstructing your view? Because it's going to take up more space. So with this, we have no display. We have no rev light, which means none of this is bright and in our face. And we also didn't pay for those if we're not going to use them. And if you're in VR, you definitely don't need to pay for any of those features. Now with that, it's not a completely blank wheel. We still have those indicator lights. And this is actually something that I really dig. Getting a few indicator lights means that it's not just like an old school wheel. It is very modern in feel, and those indicator lights are really awesome. When I hit the pit limiter, and I get two flashing green lights in the center, letting me know, confirming that the pit limiter is on and I'm going to be at reduced speed. When I get onto pit lane, this right button is going to light up yellow the moment I cross that line, confirming you better be at that right pit lane speed. And then upon exit, it's going to turn that light off, letting me know it's time to let go of or turn off the pit limiter. So it gives you just enough information that is critical. And because there's not a lot going on, it is very noticeable when driving. It's not competing with a rev light or a display for my attention. I've seen other things like a blue flag when I had a car who was a lap ahead coming up behind me. It actually gave me a blue light letting me know that it was going on. And then it's got the flash letting you know it's time to shift. So instead of a whole rev bar, you're just getting a shift light just like you'd get on a tachometer telling you, yep, it's time to shift. So now that we've covered the stiffness and the quick release and all of that, let's move on to other things about the wheel. So the grip on the wheel, it is a rubber grip. It is fairly comfortable. I call this the blade shape, where you have a real flattened outside edge and a little bit more pointy on the front. And I think that that makes a really comfortable grip if you tend to leave your fingers outward. And so when you're reaching, like if your normal position is your fingers are on top of the paddle shifters outside of the rim, I think it's a really good, comfortable position with that flatter outside. Now, if you tend to do more of a wrap, you're going to notice that the rim is a lot wider than it is thick. But I do like the comfort. So when I'm using it the way I drive a wheel like this, which is normally my 4 fingers sitting out there on the paddles, and the paddles are big enough to rest all 4 fingers on it, which is nice. And there's a little groove on the back of the paddle shifter, so you can kind of even get a little bit of grip with your fingers. But the comfort of the rim is really nice, and the rubber it's a hard rubber. I don't feel like it's going to wear out at all. It's not super cushiony. Now I'm using gloves right now, and it feels real nice. So good comfort in the grip, a good amount of shape, and you'd expect that, I guess, since it's an actual Ferrari design, being a 1-to-1 replica. Now let's move into more of the functions of the wheel itself, starting with the buttons. So while driving, without pivoting or moving my hands off the steering wheel, with a good normal driving position grip, with my thumbs I can operate both top rotary knobs, I guess we'll call them, as well as 3 buttons. So that gives me 10 functions while driving without having to lift my hands whatsoever. Now there are plenty more functions in the steering wheel to get to, but those are the ones I can do while driving normally, even in the middle of a corner. From there, I do have to start lifting my hand in order to operate some of the extra buttons. So on the right-hand side, we have 3 more buttons, and on the left, we have that D-pad with 2 more buttons. Now, I can operate all of those with just a slight pivot. Rotate my hand while driving is no problem to operate those. Then finally, at the bottom, we have our 2 rotaries. Now, those, I find I really do have to completely remove my hand from the steering wheel to use, which is pretty normal and typical to most wheels. There are a lot of wheels out there, and they also have that press-in function. So I've got 3 more functions on each of those rotaries, but I do have to completely remove a hand from the wheel, so I'm going to map them to appropriate things. So now that we've covered the layout, when it comes to these buttons, it's kind of interesting. They're not backlit. Everybody's going to these super fancy high-tech wheels with backlit buttons. But when you look at the real 488 GT3 rim, what do you know? Even in 2024, they've got just colored stickers on the buttons, and that's all you're going to get as the driver. You have the markings as well, so this one tells me pit, and I actually have that one matte for pit because that's a function I use in sim racing. However, this one down here is actually labeled for drink, and obviously I don't have an on-command drink set up for my rig, so I've mapped it for something else, and now I'll have to decide, am I going to put a sticker over it, or am I just going to remember that the blue button does my delta screen, for example. Now the click on the buttons, let's talk about the buttons specifically. They are pretty short throw. They feel a little bit like those dome type click buttons. There's not a huge tactile feedback to them, but you can definitely tell when you've actually hit the button or not. You get a good confirmation. You feel it in your thumb, and you do hear it slightly with your ear as well, but they're not super duper loud. Now the upper toggles, we'll call them, real easy to operate. They just move left and right like a little bit rocker switch. And there's a little bit of a spring tension, but not too much. If you've grazed against it, you could definitely operate them. So they do move pretty freely. But at the same time, while driving, unless you've hit them by accident, you definitely have to move them enough distance to have the intention of clicking them before anything's going to actually happen. The rotaries have a really good feel. There's a good indent for each rotary position, and then there's a good click, real strong click on that indentation when you press in on them. And then that takes us to the paddle shifters themselves. These are really cool. They have dual magnets on them. There is a good amount of click, and it feels like they already have some rubber pads inside of that, and they give you more. So if you want to reduce that click, if you want to reduce the sound of that noise, you could. I really like the way the click feels right out of the gate. It's got a good amount of movement. It's got a good, powerful, tactile feel when you click it, and you can even hear it as well, which is always important to me. Those notifications as a driver, that when I asked for something, it just verified that it actually happened. So that's always nice. The positioning, right now they're in the stock position, which is a little bit inboard, but I can move them wider, which might be more comfortable for some drivers. And they're actually a pretty far distance from the grips. So I have a pretty open grip, which feels nice, but that's something that you're going to want to adjust for your own comfort and even fatigue. But I could actually make the paddles closer if that's what I wanted as well. So a little bit of adjustment to the paddles in the amount of click sensation, as well as the distance, and as well as the how far outward set position they come in. So pretty good there. They are metal paddle shifters. They are very stiff. And I do like this little machined indentation because I actually do kind of feel my fingertips in them, and it just makes me confident that my fingers aren't going to slip off. It's like it made it a little bit more of an integral part of the steering wheel, so that when I'm sitting here in this driving position, that it feels like the wheel was built for me to hold it in exactly this manner or way. And that really takes us to the visual aspects of this steering wheel, which while driving, hopefully you're not spending too much time looking at the steering wheel. And I did cover most of this when we were just going over the wheel at the beginning. But I do like the look. I do appreciate real carbon fiber, even though it could be a little bit stiffer on those outer edges. But it does look nicer than faux carbon fiber. You can tell when it's the real deal. And this one, with the way the glassy finishes on it, looks really nice, and it looks like expensive carbon fiber even. The other thing is that Ferrari badge. I mean, you gotta love the Ferrari badge in the middle. And I mean, if you're in racing, there is no name that is more historic, more important, more iconic than Ferrari. And I'm a huge Ferrari fan. So if I'm gonna build a rig, that might be one of the marquees that I'm actually trying to mimic.
What? Luigi follow on with the Ferraris.
When building my rig, and obviously this is going to be the nicest version of a 488 GT3 wheel in that respect. The other thing, as I mentioned, because we don't have that display, I'm loving the wheels now that we've had so many wheels to choose from and so many wheels that we've used or reviewed here on the show. You start to see the different types of wheels, and displays. If we're just talking formula style wheels, does it have a display or not? Does it have a rev strip or not? All of that stuff's going to take real estate. So it makes the wheel taller, and it makes it start obstructing the view a little bit more. And personally, I don't use those displays as much as I think I would. I tend to use more of the on-screen graphics, so I find the display looks flashy, it looks really cool on my rig, but it doesn't necessarily offer me a whole lot when it comes down to driving. Now, with that said, if I have a display, I will use it. I will look at the timer. I will look at my fuel. I will look at my tire wear if it's available. But a lot of time that stuff's available on the screen. Same thing with the rev lights. Sometimes they're a little bright. Some people don't like having flashing lights at that kind of consistency because it's happening every time you get through the RPMs of the car, and you might even find that annoying. Now, you can always adjust the brightness. You can adjust the brightness here on these indicator lights even, but some people don't need that. It's going to take space. You're going to pay for it, and it is just something else that maybe you want, maybe you don't, and it might determine what wheel you're actually going to want or buy. With the indicator lights, I like their function. I like the simplicity. I like the way this wheel, it feels like this is the bare bones. We've given you everything you need with no extra frills, which is kind of funny to think that coming from Ferrari, this is almost like the no frills wheel. But I think there's a reason they went that route, because for even the real car, well, it keeps it really simple. So overall, I really like this. This is such an important wheel because Trhustmaster was a little late on the game, admittedly, with their direct drive wheel. And when they first came out with it, the T818, it was great that they kept the backward compatibility. But because of that adapter, we just had additional flex that in the direct drive wheel of 2024, I think a lot of people were just not going to find that acceptable. And so with this wheel, even though it's a plastic quick release, it is stronger. It is definitely a step in the right direction for Thrustmaster, and is definitely the best wheel right now for the T818 base. And hopefully we're going to see more rims come out at a pretty decent rate. Hopefully a round rim, maybe something like the SF1000 wheel, where it does have fancy display and all those added features and probably double the cost. So overall, I really enjoyed this wheel, and when driving in an Assetto Corsa or iRacing with the actual Ferrari to match, well, that is what sim racing is all about. Well, at this point, I think I've told you everything that I can about the Thrustmaster 488 GT3 wheel rim, but just to read between the lines and pick out the very, very most important facts, let's break it down with the good, the not so good, and the bottom line, starting off with the good, and that being great price. New quick release system. Low profile, good visibility. Looks cool. 1-to-1 Ferrari replica. Comfortable. Real carbon fiber. Indicator lights. Good feeling shifters. Backward compatible. And now on to the not so good. Well, it is kind of basic in today's day and age. Plastic quick release. Slight flex under the heaviest of loads. And now on to the bottom line. Is the 488 GT3 wheel rim kind of basic? Yeah, it really is. It doesn't have any rev bar. It doesn't have a fancy display. It doesn't have backlit buttons. But you know what? That's exactly what some people want or need, and it makes it a great bang for buck coming in at only $249. Now, the new quick release system made it both onto the good and the not so good list, and there's a good reason for that. It made it on the good list because it is by far the coolest and by far the strongest quick release that Trhustmaster has ever made. However, it is 2024 and it is made entirely of plastic, and when you look at a lot of the other quick release systems out there, they're all made of metal. All this takes me back to our original reviews of the T818 wheelbase, and that being, I love the way this wheelbase drives. It has great force feedback delivery, and I think Trhustmaster got it just right when it came to the amount of power you need and the way it delivers effects into your hands. However, with that quick release, it just feels kind of dated, and I could just be so hopeful that someday Trhustmaster would make a T818 Pro and take all this goodness and just make it that much stiffer to match the competition. So hands down, this combination from Trhustmaster is one of my absolute favorites. You gotta love the Ferrari branding. It just looks the part. It feels the part. When your friends come over, they're gonna really be impressed. It just looks that cool. And I mean, I'm a Ferrari fan, so maybe even call me a little biased there. The wheel, I love that it is basic, so it keeps that cost down low. It is high function for the amount of price, and at $249, it eases the pain of the price of the base itself. So the combination does really make a pretty good package. Now, I don't want to overly dwell on the flex. I mean, it really only shows itself when you're doing that G.I. Joe Kung Fu grip and looking at it close up. When you're driving, you don't feel it at all. This is a great driving system. So the GT3 wheel rim on its own, it's great to see Trhustmaster getting that quick release system directly onto the T818. No more adapters. That is totally cool. And hopefully we're going to see more wheel rim options from Trhustmaster for the T818 in the not too distant future. So I hope you've enjoyed this review of the 488 GT3 wheel rim. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can find out when our next video comes out. And thank you for watching. This is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.